The dog first appeared on a gray morning in November, sitting at the gate as though it had an appointment, and for 3 long years, through rain and snow and blistering summer heat, it never once stopped coming back. Old Frank Mercer saw it from his kitchen window that first day and thought nothing of it. Strays wandered up to his farm now and then. Folks from town had a bad habit of dumping unwanted animals out on the country roads, and some of them found their way to Frank's place at the far edge of Pine Hollow. He figured this one would move along by nightfall the way they always did. But when Frank looked out again at dusk, the dog was still there. A thin, brown, medium-sized thing, sitting perfectly upright just outside the wooden gate, staring down the long dirt driveway toward the house. Frank was 71 years old, and he lived alone, and he liked it that way. Or at least that's what he told himself. His wife, Ruth, had passed nearly a decade ago, and his only son had died long before that, in an accident Frank never spoke of and had never truly recovered from. Grief had made the old farmer hard and solitary. He kept to his fields, kept to his routine, and kept the whole world at arm's length. The last thing he wanted was some flea-bitten stray depending on him. So the next morning, when the dog was still sitting at the gate, Frank walked out and shooed it away. "Go on," he shouted, waving his arms. Go find somebody else." The dog stood, backed up a few steps, and watched him with calm, patient brown eyes. It did not run, it did not cower, it simply waited until Frank went back inside, and then it returned to its spot at the gate and sat back down. This went on for a week. Frank tried everything short of cruelty. He ignored it, hoping it would lose interest. He sprayed the hose in its direction to frighten it off. He even drove it 10 miles down the road one afternoon, dropped it near the town, and came home feeling guilty and relieved all at once. The dog was back at the gate before sundown, sitting in the exact same spot, its brown coat matted with road dust, waiting. Frank couldn't understand it. There was nothing at his farm for the animal. He never fed it, or at least he told himself he wouldn't. But something in those patient eyes wore him down. One frozen morning, against every stubborn bone in his body, Frank carried out a bowl of scraps and set it down by the gate. The dog ate every bite, then looked up at him with a quiet gratitude that pierced something in the old man's chest. But it still wouldn't come inside the gate. It ate what Frank offered, and then it went right back to its post, sitting and watching the road as though it were waiting for something, or someone. And that was the strangest part of all. The dog never behaved like a stray hoping for a home. It behaved like a creature keeping a vigil. The seasons turned, and the dog stayed. Frank gave up trying to drive it off. He started leaving food out every day and a bed of straw in the lee of the barn where the wind couldn't reach it. He never let it in the house. He told himself he wasn't that kind of soft old fool. But slowly, without quite meaning to, Frank began to talk to the animal. He'd walk out to the gate in the evenings and tell it about his day, about the weather, about the fields. The dog would rest its head on its paws and listen, its tail thumping softly in the dirt. And Frank, who had spoken to almost no one in years, found that the great weight he'd been carrying since Ruth died grew just a little lighter each time he did. The people in town noticed. Pine Hollow was small, and word got around about old Frank Mercer and the dog that lived at his gate. Some folks found it sweet, others found it strange. That dog's been sitting out there for 2 years now, just sitting day and night staring down that road. What in the world is it waiting for? Nobody had an answer. Frank himself had stopped asking. He'd simply accepted it, the loyal, patient presence at the edge of his lonely farm, keeping its silent watch. It was in the 3rd year, on a bitterly cold morning in late winter, that everything changed. Frank woke that day feeling every one of his years. His joints ached, his heart felt heavy, and he'd been dreaming of Ruth and of his lost son all night long. He shuffled out to the gate with the dog's breakfast, and he found the animal shivering hard in the frost, thinner than usual, moving slow. It was getting old now, too, Frank realized. They both were. And as he knelt down to set the bowl in front of it, something caught his eye. Something he had somehow never truly looked at in 3 whole years. A collar. Buried deep in the fur around the dog's neck, worn and faded almost to nothing, was an old leather collar with a small tarnished metal tag hanging from it. Frank's hands trembled as he reached out. The dog held perfectly still, as though it had waited 3 long years for this exact moment. Gently, the old farmer worked the collar around and rubbed the dirt from the little tag. There was a name engraved on it, and when Frank read that name, his whole world stopped. The tag said Buddy, and beneath the name was a phone number. But it wasn't the name that struck the old man dumb and sent the blood draining from his face. It was the second line, engraved smaller beneath the number. It read, "If found, please call Daniel Mercer." Daniel, his son who died 14 years ago. Frank knelt there in the frozen dirt, that little tag shaking in his weathered fingers, and the memories came flooding back all at once. Daniel had wanted a dog back when he was a young man, right before the accident. He talked about it constantly. He'd even picked out a name, Buddy, for the dog he was going to get someday. But Daniel died before that day ever came, and Frank, drowning in his grief, had done his best to forget every dream his son never got to live. But here was a dog named Buddy, wearing a collar engraved with his dead son's name, sitting at his gate for 3 years, waiting. Frank drove into town that very morning, the dog riding in the passenger seat of his truck for the first time. He went to the little library, and with the help of a kind young woman there, he traced the collar and the phone number as far back as anyone could. What he learned brought the old man to tears right there at the desk. The dog was old, very old for a dog, nearly 15 years. Years ago, before Daniel died, he had secretly put a deposit down on a puppy from a breeder 2 counties over, meaning to surprise his father with it. Daniel had already had the collar made, already chosen the name, but then the accident happened, and the puppy, little more than a memory of a plan, had been sold to another family, its collar going with it. That family had moved away, and somewhere along the years the dog had been lost or abandoned or just run, and somehow, across more than a decade and 100 miles, some instinct in that animal had carried it to the one gate in all the world where it was always meant to belong. Daniel's dog, the dog his son had chosen for him all those years ago, it had finally come home. Frank Mercer, the hard and solitary old man who had kept the whole world at arm's length, sat in his truck in the library parking lot and wept like he had not wept since the day he buried his boy. And then he reached over, and for the first time in 3 years, he pulled that faithful old dog into his arms and held it close. "You came a long way, didn't you, Buddy? You came a long, long way to find me, and I'm so sorry it took me so long to see you." That day, Buddy came inside the house for the very first time. Frank made him a bed by the fire, and the dog that had waited 3 years at the gate finally lay down and rested, as though its long journey were complete at last. And Frank was never the same lonely man again. Word of what happened spread through Pine Hollow like wildfire, and the whole town was moved to tears by it. The strange dog at the gate had been a mystery for years, and now they understood. They understood that it had been carrying a message all along, from a young man who died too soon to a grieving father who had forgotten how to love. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to Frank in a decade started coming by again. The old man's heart, frozen shut for so many years, cracked open at last, and the warmth came pouring back in. Buddy lived just 1 more year, one good, happy year, warm by the fire, walking the fields at Frank's side, sleeping at the foot of his bed. And when the old dog finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, Frank buried him beneath the big tree by the gate, in the very spot where he had kept his 3-year vigil. He set a small stone there, and on it he carved a few simple words. "Buddy, my son's last gift. He waited 3 years to bring me home to myself."
And for the rest of his own days, whenever old Frank Mercer passed that gate, he would rest his hand on the stone a moment and look down the long dirt road and remember that love has a way of finding us, no matter how far it has to travel, no matter how long it has to wait, no matter how tightly we've shut the gate against it, because some loyalty outlives everything, even grief, even time, even death itself.